In a short while, we're going to be hearing three interesting testimonies, I'm going to call them that, and reflections from three dynamic nations. I'm going to start off by saying, before we introduce the topic itself, is that coming from the African continent, where we know that we really need development accelerated at pace, we're seeing leaders looking all across the world for examples of who's done it very quickly, and what are the examples to emulate. And I have to tell you, as a talk show host in South Africa, the case of China, the People's Republic of China, comes up very, very often. And this is because China, through the example and the words and the policies of Deng Xiaoping, has been able, in a generation, to lift 800 million people out of poverty. And that is a truly inspiring example for many people in Africa. And it is a situation that many policymakers are urged to look at and see if they can emulate. It is about ending poverty. Then we read about Central Asia and Kazakhstan, a regional power in Central Asia, but an economy whose production and economic activity now accounts for 60% of economic activity in Central Asia. And they've also fared very highly in the rankings on human development indices. And then, of course, we've heard the story of Sierra Leone, and we're going to hear more about the programs that Sierra Leone is pursuing towards climate resistance. And so with that, ladies and gentlemen, if we can just lend an ear as I'm going to introduce you to our next speakers. All right, we're collaborating for impact, and we'd like to yield the floor to you now, Kandeh Yumkella, who is the chairman of the Presidential Initiative on Climate Change, Renewable Energy and Food Security in Sierra Leone.
Good morning, Your Excellency, President of OPEC Fund, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. It's an honor and a privilege to be here to share a few ideas with you. It feels like coming back home. I've collaborated with OPEC Fund for over 2 decades. It was in the Hofburg, in collaboration with OPEC Fund and others, that we forged the development of Sustainable Development Goal number 7. It was in here almost 20 years ago that we did that work together with OPEC Fund and others after a major conference in Saudi Arabia on energy poverty. I also feel honored to be here because as Director General of UNIDO for 2 terms, I also led the effort for developing Sustainable Development Goal number 9, which reads, building resilient infrastructure, promoting sustainable industrialization, and fostering innovation. So I feel honored that I'm here again together with OPEC Fund in this innovative forum. It is also here back in 2007, 2008 that we started another forum, which still exists today. The last time they did it last November, they had about 1,500 participants in the room, in the big hall, and also about 2,000 online. So here we have another innovation from OPEC Fund. I'm very pleased, Your Excellency, that you're always innovating, finding the right platforms, using your convening power to bring people together to dialogue and collaborate on emerging challenges around the world. In the DNA of OPEC Fund, and of course, one of the themes of our discussion is about South-South cooperation. Mahathir Mohamad, the Prime Minister of Malaysia, used to say back then, 25, 30 years ago, when we were doing conferences, I was 20 years in the UN, when we were doing conferences in Malaysia, he said, you remember, prosper thy neighbor. If you have a peaceful neighbor, a prosperous neighbor, you will be at peace. And I think that's the spirit of South-South cooperation. Sometimes the answers, the solutions we're looking for are really next door. Your neighbor would have done something right. somebody else in the global south would have done something right. And indeed, with the staff and the whole institution of OPEC Fund, it is core of their DNA to push for South-South cooperation. Let me share a few ideas with you. Indeed, you've heard of the global crisis in which we live, multiple crises, which is creating a trust deficit. I was in the global governance system for over 20 years, in various multilateral institutions, leading UN agency myself, together with Ban Ki-moon. But we worry now about the growing mistrust. That's why these kinds of forums, smaller forums, to allow this interaction is crucial. But we need a world that is truly committed to equity, to inclusiveness. Equity and inclusiveness. So I pick one issue. How do we reform the global governance institutions themselves to be inclusive, to reflect the voices and the ambitions of us in the global south? I give you one example. 40% of the critical minerals we need to push the global transition, energy transition, are in Africa. 40% or more. Give you some examples. In my neighborhood, we're sitting on at least 9 of the critical minerals between Sierra Leone, Guinea, Liberia, and Côte d'Ivoire. Guinea alone has the largest deposit and the purest deposit today of iron ore. But yet, our 3 countries in that neighborhood are amongst the 10 poorest. Is that equity, is that inclusiveness? We're very pleased that the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, together with UNIDO, have started a new initiative on responsible mining and inclusiveness. Because if the global energy transition is going to move forward, these minerals are key to battery systems, solar panels, and all kinds of smart grids with the minerals we have. But yes, we have to benefit. Some of our countries export billions of dollars of minerals, yet the value left back is 7% or 10%. Is that fair? Is that equitable? So how do we reform global institutions of trade, of finance, to change that architecture for the sake of peace and stability around the world? That's key. I hope that becomes part of our discussion on institutional reforms. Because yes, unfair trade is one of the most unfair and, in fact, divisive and depriving situation in our world. Our children want to be better. They want jobs. And the demands, as you heard from our presidents, are real. Number 2, climate change. We are told now that every month of this year is the hottest. Every month. At least last month, they said last month was the hottest. We see what happens this month. It begs the question, we're going to COP29. Are we taking our commitment seriously? Or is it just a show? I was part of the global governance structure 20 years, central to it. Is this the right mechanism still? We already know the answer for COP29. We knew already the answer for COP28, the global stocktake. I say this because I was central in that system. We have to ask ourselves, are these commitments real? Because we in the developing countries, particularly in Africa, are paying the price. The climate, the extreme weather events are real. The devastation is real. And every study shows a 1 degree rise in temperature in the temperate areas, in the Sahel, is 1.5. How do we deal with this? Do we need different types of global governance structures to really address the real issues and, as the president said, follow our commitments? It's not only commitments in terms of financial flows, but it is commitments in being responsible citizens. Those who emit more must also change how they use energy and how they also emit in better ways. The third element I'll leave with you is looking south. The solutions are here. There are many solutions. Our colleague, the presenter, mentioned what is happening in China, what is happening in India, what is happening in countries like Malaysia on food production, on innovation. 60% of the world's arable land is in Africa. We can feed all of you. But we need the partnerships, we need the investments, we need the infrastructure. And I am very pleased OPEC Fund identified innovations in infrastructure. We need to open up the space and build competitiveness of our economies. So yes, our economies can grow, there can be structural change. We can create the jobs for the youth. We need a minimum of 20,000 jobs every year in Africa. This is reality. I lived in Austria for a long time. I still live here, I have a home here, because I worked here for a long time. I say to my friends in Europe, don't close your borders on us. Our children don't necessarily want to come. We just want prosperity in the south. In the south, we're the nearest neighbor to Europe. The global architecture, the trade has to change. We want our children to come here as paying tourists, but it depends on the opportunities we all create together in the south. If our countries are just sources of extraction, of minerals, of wealth, then the world is not stable. By 2050, we'll be 2.2 billion. 2.2 billion. That's power, that's human resource. But yes, we want industrialization, we want competitiveness, we want growth. The relationship has to change. The relationship of one of mutual respect, mutual prosperity, prosperity for all, energy access, infrastructure, innovation is important for that. We want to thank OPEC Fund. We're partnering with OPEC Fund and a number of partners here, including the Arab Coordination Group. We thank you for what you did yesterday, focusing the spotlight on our unique situation in our country. We want to be partners. I give you one statistic. My country has the purest deposit of titanium in the world, the second largest. We've just discovered another huge deposit of lithium. Do we just ship it raw, or are we partners in the global transition for energy security and growth? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to you, Mr. Yumkella, for setting the context in a very frank and candid manner and raising some of the more uncomfortable issues around the need to really think about reforming multilateral institutions and changing the global architecture, at very best expanding on the designs of those multilateral organizations. What you've just said reminds me of something that President Paul Kagame said 2 weeks ago, which is that if you find yourselves as members of the Global South, if you find yourself not at the table, you must know you're on the menu. So make sure you bring yourself a chair. All right, without further ado, we'd like to hear the story of Kazakhstan. As I said, a regional power in Central Asia, and they've done really formidable things about lifting growth. They account for about 60% of economic activity in the region. And with all their resources, they've transformed lives. They rank very highly in international development, human development indices. So if you could come and share with us insights, Your Excellency, the Deputy Prime Minister of Kazakhstan, Nurlan Baybarazov.
Your Excellency, Dr. Abdulhamid Al-Khalifa, dear participants, it is a great honor for me to participate in the Development Forum organized by the OPEC Fund for International Development, and I am deeply convinced that this forum will give a new impetus to economic cooperation. Kazakhstan places special importance to the development partnerships with international financial organizations. The reforms carried out during the 30 years of Kazakhstan's independence made possible largely due to the support of these institutions. Kazakhstan is implementing significant structural and institutional reforms. In our work, we follow 5 key principles: rule of law, ensuring justice and judiciary independence, fair competition and economic freedom, promoting fair markets and dismantling monopolies, open, prosperous economy and citizen income growth, fostering economic growth and citizen prosperity through policy consistency and investment barriers removal, human capital development, prioritizing education and healthcare for collective prosperity and transformation of public administration, modernizing bureaucracy and enhancing transparency for citizen-centric governance. In 2024, Kazakhstan introduces fresh regulatory approach, regulation from scratch. This new framework prioritizes enhancing economic freedoms, fostering fair competition, and breaking down monopolies to open up markets. Key strategic focuses of these economic reforms entail boosting our industrial capacity, facilitating deeper integration into global markets, embracing digitalization, and enhancing infrastructure quality and accessibility. The Liberalization Decree marks another significant step towards the denationalization of the economy, promoting business development and free competition, removing barriers to market access. To attract new investors, the comprehensive privatization plan will be expanded with the new assets by the end of this year. The National Privatization Office, established on May 28, 2024, will evaluate state-owned companies, including companies of national holding Samruk Kazyna. For each of them, the conditions and methods of selling, such as IPO, SPO, auctions, and other methods will be determined. The government aims to attract at least 150 billion of foreign direct investments until 2029. In order to achieve this goal, the investment policy concept until 2029 has been developed, which focuses on initiating a new investment cycle and revising the investment policy. Today, there are a wide range of state investment support measures within the framework of the current legislation. To bolster these efforts, new regulatory framework for entrepreneurs will be introduced, streamlining business operations and making it much easier to do business in Kazakhstan. This year, Kazakhstan is set to implement a new tax code for simulation of manufacturing projects with high processing level. The new tax code will introduce a reduced corporate income tax rate of 10%. Establishment of such a conducive legislative environment has led to growth of foreign direct investments into Kazakhstan. In 2023, foreign investments in Kazakhstan reached $23.4 billion, with approximately $15 billion allocated to non-resource sectors. This positions Kazakhstan as a leading recipient of foreign investments among CIS countries. Looking ahead, our goal is to double our GDP by 2029, reaching $25 billion. To achieve this, we are laying a strong foundation through initiatives to stimulate economic activity. Initiatives include implementation of the National Infrastructure Plan until 1999. Plan focuses on developing critical infrastructure and includes more than 200 projects in key areas such as transport, energy, water, and digital infrastructure, totaling around $80 billion. These reforms are driven by our commitment to achieve sustainable, inclusive economic growth. Our aim is to ensure a substantial increase in national income and to distribute benefits equitably, leading to significant improvements in the living standards of our people. We are targeting economic growth rate of 6% annually in this year and in medium-term period. I am pleased to report that the proportion of small and medium-sized enterprises in our economy has risen to 36.5%, indicating positive process. Furthermore, Kazakhstan's foreign trade turnover has reached all-time high of $140 billion. In conclusion, I wish to emphasize that we are eager to collaborate with major financial institutions like the esteemed members of the Arab Coordination Group to gain support in fulfilling our ambitious plans of boosting Kazakhstan economy. Thank you.
And thank you very much, Deputy Prime Minister. We are truly intrigued and excuse me, and we look forward to learning more about Kazakhstan. Now I'd like to yield the floor to Minister Leone from the People's Republic of China, the Vice Minister of Finance. As I said, here is a country in a generation that has ended poverty for 800 million people, and not only that, has grown to become the second largest economy in the world. No small feat. So over to you, Minister Lau.
So thank you for kind introduction, Narito. So Your Excellency, Deputy Prime Minister Babazarov, Honorable Minister Ajadan, and President Al Khalifa, and distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. So it's my pleasure to attend this important forum. So just now, President Bell and Chairman Yumkella highlight the development vision and the progress Sierra Leone has made. And also we heard Deputy Prime Minister Babazarov, Kazakhstan's story, so which is very insightful and informative. So Minister Ajadan, I recalled vividly our bilateral dialogue in Beijing last month. Your remarks are clear-cut. The comprehensive economic reforms are pivotal in enhancing economic resilience. So I'm sure those ideas will inspire many other developing countries. So Chinese people in my generation have witnessed economic transformation process in China over the past 40 years. Our hands-on experiences might provide most relevant and recent reference for the fellow developing countries. So what has China done right? I would like to share my observation very briefly around the three themes of the opening session. The first question a developing country has to answer is how to cultivate institutional changes to better allocate the capital and the labor resources. So China's answer is reform and opening up. Our reform started from rural areas in early 1980s. So we set up the right incentive scheme for farmers to lift their agricultural productivity rate. So as a result, millions of rural laborers could be freed and move into the new established small private enterprises in many towns. And then later on, more than 300 million rural workers migrated to cities, which is exactly the industrialization and urbanization. China's open up started in some coastal cities. Special economic zones were built in cities like Shenzhen. So due to the unique geographic advantages, they could integrate the massive young Chinese labor forces with the global surplus capital and better technologies more efficiently. So reform and open up are key institutional innovation and serve as the successful code for China. Second, it's the infrastructure that stimulate growth and reduce poverty. So there is a household, the Chinese saying, the roads lead to riches. So new investment in infrastructure such as transportation, communication, and energy is essential for improving regional connectivity, which brought labor forces and commodities in poor regions into national and global markets. Today, China is accelerating its smart infrastructure by harnessing AI and digital technologies. You could get the farmers' agricultural products like the fresh flowers from western mountain areas to Beijing within 2 days. And the price is affordable and unbelievable due to the market scale effect. The smart infrastructure has connected over 1 billion internet users in China. And in 2023, the estimated value added from the core digital industries is about 12 trillion yuan, or 10% of GDP, and it continues to increase. Thirdly, it's education that unleashed the human capital. The government built the input in education has been maintained at over 4% of GDP since 2012. And more importantly, ordinary Chinese families value education highly. The Chinese family, on average, spend around 15% of their total expense on education, so which substantially promote the upward social mobility. I believe most of you have heard the phrase, the tiger mother. So Chinese people believe that education is the only way to change the destiny of one individual and his whole families in 3 generations, so including his parents and including his children, so who can have a better life together in towns and cities. So that's when parents save more and invest more in their children's education. So as a whole, the Chinese reform and opening up looks like a symphony. You need a good conductor with a clear guidance. You need a clear scope with a solid implementation. And you need a group of players with the right incentive program. Of course, China also faces challenges. So as our economy grows rapidly, we realized the importance of sustainable development, as in other countries. So to address all those issues or challenges, so President Xi Jinping proposed another household saying in China, that is clean water and green mountain are invaluable assets, like gold and silver. So we believe with the emerging new green technology today, we hope our fellow developing countries could have better chances than yesterday's China and others. So ladies and gentlemen, China does not stop. Now being the second largest economy, so China continues to transform its economy by optimizing the structure of labor, capital, and technology, both at the supply side and demand side. So on the one hand, China focused on expanding domestic demand, so the consumption can and will play a fundamental role in economic growth. On the other hand, we are determined to align ourselves with international economic and trade rules. So we call this as the institutional openness with the transparent, stable, and predictable standards. Why? Because we believe that although the Chinese domestic market for Chinese investors, it's a domestic market, but it's one of the most important international markets for other investors in China. In addition, many Chinese companies now go global and bring with them the most relevant and the latest experiences to combine their capital and technology with the local young labor resources in many other developing countries, so which I believe they can help all these countries and economics. So ladies and gentlemen, in 2023, the foreign direct investment attracted by emerging economies accounts for only 1.5% of their GDP, which is the lowest level in this century. So there is still a long way to go for our emerging economies in such an unstable and fragmented global economic situation. China has always been a member of the Global South. So we encourage and support international development organizations like OPEC Fund to collaborate with other MDBs, including AIIB and the New Development Bank. The OPEC Fund has forged solid friendship with China for many years. So last year, President Al-Khalifa visited Shanxi Vocational College, so which is an example of building human resources potential. Yesterday, I had another important and meaningful discussion with the president. So we believe with the strong partnership, we will walk the last mile together and to mobilize more resources for developing countries and contribute to global poverty reductions and sustainable development. So let me stop here. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.